We're back with Bryan Hayes and Frankie Corrado. Now, guys, we don't see many offer sheets in the NHL, let alone one team giving two players on the same team offer sheets at the same time. So it's an interesting strategy by the St. Louis Blues to go after both Dylan Holloway and Phillip Broberg. And this, of course, comes off the heels of the Oilers representing the West in the Stanley Cup final. So, Frankie, let's start with you. Should Edmonton feel targeted by this strategy?
No, they shouldn't feel targeted. They should feel like they were capped out and they were vulnerable, and the St. Louis Blues are going to exploit that. And that's not something that we've seen very often for a number of reasons. Maybe GMs don't want to piss each other off. Maybe we've lived in a flat cap world where other teams don't have a lot of money to overpay for RFAs that may or may not turn out. Take a look at Jesperi Kotkaniemi in Carolina. But the fact of the matter is this. The Edmonton Oilers have a lot of money that they have to spend in the future, and both these guys, Broberg and Holloway, the Oilers were hoping to get for much cheaper cap hits than the St. Louis Blues offered them on their offer sheet. So they were vulnerable. Now, the question becomes, are they a worse team, or are they that much of a worse team without having both these guys? Listen, they're probably going to have to keep at least one of them, and I would say their Stanley Cup odds don't necessarily change because they don't have Holloway and Broberg. It really does make a hit to the future, though, because you don't know, if you don't have those guys, what the future could have held for them in Edmonton and what they could have developed into. That's if you don't keep them.
Yeah, I think targeted is an appropriate word here because nobody else seems to do this around the NHL. There are some cases we've seen over the years, but very rarely do you see it, let alone a double attack on the same day. Two different players. And I think the Blues are basically forcing Edmonton to pick one or the other. I would guess they'll keep Holloway and probably let Broberg walk. I don't think they love him at that price. I don't think he's a top four defenseman. He barely was in the NHL at times last year. So I think St. Louis understands this is a calculated move that is going to force the hand of Edmonton. It's also a compliment to the Oilers because they are the target in the West. They're the best team in the West. St. Louis knows they're chasing them. Other teams in the West know they're chasing them. They know they got a ton of talent. They have to figure out what's going to happen with Evander Kane and then his cap situation in the future. What happens with Draisaitl? What happens in McDavid in a couple of years? But those are great players. This is Broberg and Holloway. Good players, young players, but not established players. So I think if you're the Oilers, you're probably looking around wondering, why us? Okay, we'll turn the tables and maybe we'll go after you in the future. That's always been the thought in the NHL. But it's within the CBA. The Blues can do it. The Oilers are up against it. They got 7 days to figure this out. But I think, again, if you walk away with this thinking to yourself, if you're the Oilers, we are the best team in the West, maybe in the league, come get us. Come try to get us, and we're still going to be standing afterwards.
Take your best shot. Yep. I mean, it's calculated moves, and if the Blues are just trying to get one of the two players, then I guess we'd say this was successful if they end up with Holloway or Broberg. But if that's the case, why is it that we don't see more teams offer sheets to pry players away from other teams?
It would appear as if it's always been a gentleman's agreement. I mean, you'll recall Brian Burke wanted to fight someone in a barn back in the day because they had the audacity to offer someone an offer sheet. It's within the CBA. It happens in the NBA all the time. It should be happening in the NHL. I always wait for it every year, Sarah. I think this is it. It's going to burst open. Go get the best players because there's a lot of really good players who are restricted free agents. And it just doesn't happen. I'm not holding my breath that it will happen after this, but you never know. It's within the rules. I think GMs should be respectful of everyone in the league. Give them a heads up. Play by the rules, but go get the best players. And if you think Broberg's worth it, go get him. Holloway's worth it, go get him. There's a lot of good RFAs out there. I don't know why GMs haven't been doing this ever since the salary cap was implemented years ago. It should change in the future. Maybe this is a watershed moment.
Maybe there is a little bit of a gentleman's agreement, and I wouldn't put that past the general managers in the National Hockey League. But we've also lived in a world, a flat cap world, where teams have their own hurdles as far as managing their own cap structures. There just hasn't been that much money to go around. And if you had some money to spend, were you really going to spend it on an RFA, pay him more than market value to try and lure him to come to your team so that the other team can't match it, hoping that that player turns out? Like, there's a lot that needs to go right in a very tight financial world for a lot of these teams. And there's only been two successful offer sheets in the cap world. It's been Dustin Penner. It's been Jesperi Kotkaniemi. So not exactly the biggest of names and the biggest of impacts. So there has been a little bit of a buyer beware when it comes to RFAs. And let's be honest, if you're going after a big name guy and offering him big money, chances are teams are going to match that. So this is a little bit different. Phillip Broberg hasn't exactly established himself as a top 4 defenseman in the National Hockey League. They want to give him $4.5 million. That's a lot of money. Dylan Holloway, a little more reasonable when it comes to the cap hit, but there just hasn't been that much money to go around for teams to overspend on other teams' RFAs.
It also takes two to tango, right? The players don't always want to go down that road. There may be teams out there actively seeking out RFAs, and the players, they don't want to rock the boat. They're loyal. They want to stay. They want to get paid, but they don't want to leave to get paid, right? So in order for the teams to actually tenure the RFA status, the players actually got to sign it and send it back and say, if my team, in this case Edmonton, doesn't match, I'm willing to go to St. Louis. I'm sure there's a lot of players in the league that don't want to go down that road.
Perhaps, but maybe with more money, less gentlemen's agreements to come. We'll wait and see. Guys, thanks for this.